The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Sarah Chen adjusted her crisp uniform for the 100th time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold October air, but from the weight of what lay ahead. Today was the day she had worked toward for 3 grueling years, her final evaluation to become the youngest female officer in her unit's history. "You're wasting your time, Sarah," her father's voice echoed in her mind from their phone call the night before. Colonel Richard Chen had served 30 years in the military, earning respect and medals that lined their family home. But, when it came to his daughter's dreams, his support crumbled like sand. "She can't do it," he had told her mother just loud enough for Sarah to hear through the kitchen doorway. "The military isn't a place for little girls playing dress-up." Those words had stung deeper than any physical wound. Sarah had grown up on military bases, watching her father command respect from hundreds of soldiers. She had dreamed of following in his footsteps since she was old enough to understand what honor and service meant. Every scraped knee from obstacle courses, every sleepless night studying military strategy, every push-up that left her muscles screaming, it had all been for this moment. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her father had taught her everything about discipline and perseverance, yet he couldn't see past the traditional boundaries that had shaped his own career. To him, the military was a man's world, and his daughter was setting herself up for heartbreak and failure. Sarah walked through the base, her boots clicking against the concrete with purpose. Other cadets nodded respectfully as she passed. She had earned their acknowledgement through countless hours of proving herself. When male cadets struggled with a 20-mile march, Sarah completed it and asked for more. When others complained about the physical demands, she pushed harder. Her instructors had noticed, but she knew that wasn't enough. She needed to prove herself to the one person whose opinion mattered most, General Martinez, the base commander who would decide her fate. The evaluation would consist of multiple components: a written examination on military law and strategy, a physical fitness test that would push her to her absolute limits, a leadership exercise where she would command a unit of seasoned soldiers, and, finally, a one-on-one interview with the general himself. Each component was designed to weed out those who weren't ready for the responsibility of leadership. As Sarah entered the examination hall, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. Growing up as an army brat had its challenges, but it had also given her a unique perspective on military life. She had seen the sacrifice, the dedication, and the brotherhood that defined military service. She had also witnessed the skepticism that greeted women who dared to enter this traditionally male domain. Her first instructor, Sergeant Williams, had been blunt about the challenges she would face. "The military is changing, Chen, but not everyone is ready for that change. You'll have to be twice as good to be considered half as worthy. That's not fair, but that's reality." Sarah had taken those words as a challenge rather than a discouragement. She studied military history until she could recite battle strategies from memory. She learned about leadership from books, but, more importantly, from observation. She watched how effective leaders motivated their troops, how they made difficult decisions under pressure, and how they earned respect through actions rather than words. The physical training had been the most daunting aspect. Sarah wasn't naturally the strongest or the fastest, but she discovered she had something more valuable: an unbreakable will. When others quit during grueling training exercises, she found reserves of strength she didn't know existed. She learned to push past the voice in her head that whispered about limitations and, instead, listened to the one that spoke of possibilities. Her relationship with her father had grown more strained as her military training progressed. He attended her high school graduation in uniform, chest full of ribbons and medals, but when she announced her intention to attend the military academy, his expression had turned cold. "You're throwing away opportunities for a fantasy," he had said. "This isn't some movie where determination conquers all. This is the real military, and it will chew you up and spit you out." But Sarah had persisted, driven by a vision of herself leading soldiers into battle, making strategic decisions that could save lives, and proving that courage and competence weren't defined by gender. She knew the statistics: women made up less than 20% of the military, and even fewer reached leadership positions. But statistics had never intimidated her. The examination hall filled with other candidates, mostly men who looked confident and prepared. Sarah recognized several faces from her training cohort. These were the best of the best, the ones who had survived the rigorous selection process. Looking around the room, she felt a familiar surge of determination. She belonged here, regardless of what anyone thought. As the proctor distributed the examination papers, Sarah's mind went back to a conversation she had overheard between two instructors several weeks earlier. They had been discussing the candidates, and one had mentioned her name. "Chen is impressive," he had said. "But does she have what it takes when the pressure really mounts?" Book knowledge and physical ability are one thing. Leadership under fire is something else entirely. That comment had fueled her preparation for the leadership exercise portion of the evaluation. She had studied every leadership scenario she could find, analyzing what made certain decisions effective and others disastrous. She had practiced giving orders with authority, learning to project confidence even when doubt crept in. The written examination began, and Sarah felt her training take over. Questions about military protocol, strategic planning, and ethical decision-making flowed past her with clarity. This was the easy part. She had always excelled academically. The real challenges lay ahead. During a brief break between the written exam and the physical fitness test, Sarah stepped outside for fresh air. The base was bustling with normal activity, soldiers going about their daily routines, vehicles moving supplies, the constant hum of purposeful work. This could be her world, her responsibility, her chance to make a difference. A group of senior officers walked past, deep in conversation about deployment schedules and personnel decisions. One of them glanced at her with curiosity, probably wondering what a cadet was doing in the evaluation area. Sarah stood a little straighter, remembering that she was being observed and judged every moment she was on base. The physical fitness test pushed her body to its absolute limits. Push-ups until her arms felt like rubber, a timed run that left her lungs burning, obstacle courses that tested not just strength but problem-solving under pressure. Sarah completed each challenge, driven by the memory of her father's dismissive words. Every repetition was a response to his doubt, every successful obstacle a statement of her determination. As the day progressed, candidates began to drop out or fail components of the evaluation. The initial group of 30 had dwindled to 15 by late afternoon. Sarah remained, exhausted but determined, ready for the leadership exercise that would test her ability to command respect and make critical decisions. The leadership scenario was designed to simulate a real combat situation. Sarah was given command of a squad of experienced soldiers and tasked with completing an objective while adapting to changing circumstances and unexpected challenges. This was where her book knowledge would meet practical application, where her ability to inspire and lead would be truly tested. Standing before the squad, Sarah felt the weight of command for the first time. These were real soldiers with real experience, and they were looking to her for guidance. Some faces showed skepticism, others curiosity, but all demanded proof that she deserved to lead them. The simulation began with a scenario that felt all too real. Sarah's squad was tasked with securing a strategic position while under simulated enemy fire. The experienced soldiers under her command included Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had served 2 tours overseas, Corporal Jackson, known for his tactical expertise, and Private Martinez, barely older than Sarah herself but with the hardened look of someone who had seen action. "Listen up," Sarah addressed her team, her voice carrying across the training ground with more authority than she felt inside. "Our objective is to secure Hill 247 and establish a defensive perimeter. Intelligence suggests enemy forces are dug in, and we need to approach from the eastern flank to minimize casualties." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. At 35, he had more combat experience than most officers twice Sarah's age. "With respect, ma'am, the eastern approach leaves us exposed to crossfire from the northern ridge. Standard protocol would suggest." "I understand the concern, Sergeant," Sarah interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "But intelligence also indicates that the northern ridge position was abandoned yesterday evening. We have a window of opportunity that won't last long." The debate that followed tested every aspect of Sarah's preparation. Rodriguez questioned her assessment of enemy positions. Jackson challenged her timeline for the assault.
Even Private Martinez, the youngest member of the squad, raised concerns about ammunition allocation.
Each question was a test, not just of her knowledge, but of her ability to maintain authority while remaining open to input from experienced subordinates. Sarah realized this was exactly the kind of scenario that separated good officers from great ones. She needed to balance confidence with humility, decisiveness with flexibility. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said, looking directly at the veteran soldier, "your concerns are valid, and I want your expertise as we move forward. But the decision has been made. How do we execute this plan most effectively?" The slight nod Rodriguez gave her felt like a victory. He wasn't agreeing with her strategy necessarily, but he was acknowledging her right to command. "If we're taking the Eastern approach, we'll need to move fast and quiet.
Jackson, you take point.
Martinez, stay close to the radio in case we need to call for support."
As the exercise progressed, Sarah found herself adapting to challenges she hadn't anticipated. Mock enemy fire forced them to change positions rapidly.
A simulated injury to one of her soldiers required her to reorganize the squad formation while maintaining mission focus. Communication equipment failed at a critical moment, forcing her to rely on hand signals and quick thinking. Each obstacle felt designed to break her composure, to prove that she wasn't ready for real leadership responsibility. But, with every challenge, Sarah felt herself growing stronger, more confident in her decisions. She began to understand something her textbooks couldn't teach, that leadership wasn't about having all the answers, but about making the best decisions possible with incomplete information while inspiring others to trust your judgment. The exercise culminated with a scenario that required Sarah to choose between completing the mission objective and saving a wounded soldier. It was the kind of impossible choice that real combat leaders faced, where there were no perfect answers and lives hung in the balance. Sarah looked at her squad, seeing the expectation in their eyes. They wanted to know what kind of leader she would become when the stakes were highest.
"Rodriguez, Jackson, complete the objective. Martinez, you're with me.
We're getting our soldier out." "Ma'am," Rodriguez protested, the mission is important, Sergeant, but we don't leave anyone behind."
"That's not who we are." Sarah's voice carried a conviction that surprised even her. "Execute the plan. We'll rendezvous at the extraction point in 20 minutes.
The decision felt right in a way that transcended tactical considerations. Later, the evaluators would tell her that there was no correct answer to the scenario. They were testing her decision-making process and her ability to live with the consequences of her choices.
As the exercise concluded, Sarah felt the exhaustion of the day settling into her bones.
But there was something else, a sense of confidence that hadn't been there that morning. She had commanded real soldiers, made difficult decisions under pressure, and adapted to unexpected challenges. More importantly, she had earned a measure of respect from the experienced soldiers under her command.
Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached her as they gathered their equipment.
"Good work today, ma'am," he said quietly. "You made some tough calls, and you stood by them. That matters." The compliment meant more to Sarah than any grade on a written exam. This was validation from someone who had seen real combat, who understood the weight of leadership in life and death situations.
But the day wasn't over.
The final component of her evaluation, the interview with General Martinez, still lay ahead. This was the part that made her most nervous, not because she doubted her qualifications, but because she knew this was where personal biases could override objective assessment. General Martinez had a reputation for being fair but demanding. He had risen through the ranks during a time when the military was less diverse, and, while he had adapted to changing times, some wondered whether he truly believed in the capabilities of women in combat leadership roles. As Sarah waited outside the general's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The doubt in her father's voice echoed in her memory, but it was accompanied now by the respect she had earned from Rodriguez and her squad. She thought about all the women who had fought for the right to serve in combat roles, who had faced skepticism and prejudice to open doors that she was now walking through. A young lieutenant emerged from the general's office, looking relieved but exhausted. He nodded at Sarah as he passed, and she could see both sympathy and encouragement in his expression.
Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't be the first to face it, and hopefully wouldn't be the last. Cadet Chen, the general's aide, called out. General Martinez will see you now.
Sarah stood, straightened her uniform one final time, and walked toward the door that would determine her future. As she reached for the handle, she made a silent promise to herself. Regardless of what happened in the next hour, she would represent herself, her beliefs, and every woman who had dreamed of military leadership with honor and dignity. The general's office was exactly what she had expected, walls lined with military decorations, photographs of the general with various dignitaries, and strategic maps marking deployments around the world. General Martinez himself sat behind an imposing desk, reading through what Sarah assumed was her evaluation file. He looked up as she entered, his expression neutral but attentive. Cadet Chen, please take a seat. Sarah sat with military precision, her posture reflecting years of training. This was it, the moment that would validate all her efforts or send her back to civilian life with her dreams shattered. I've been reviewing your performance today, General Martinez began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Your written examination scores were exceptional. Your physical fitness results exceeded standards. The leadership exercise. He paused, and Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The leadership exercise revealed some interesting qualities. The pause stretched longer than Sarah was comfortable with, but she maintained her composure. Years of military training had taught her that reactions under pressure revealed character, and she was determined to show strength regardless of what the general might say next. Tell me, Cadet Chen, General Martinez continued, leaning back in his chair, why do you want to be an officer in the United States Army? It was a simple question, but Sarah knew that her answer would be crucial.
This wasn't about reciting memorized responses about duty and honor.
The general wanted to understand her motivations, her commitment, and her understanding of what military leadership truly meant.
Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would define everything she had worked for.
The general's question seemed simple, but she understood it carried the weight of her entire future. Her answer needed to be honest, compelling, and demonstrate the depth of her commitment to military service. General Martinez, I want to be an officer because I believe in the responsibility that comes with leadership, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. I've grown up watching what military service means, not just the honor and duty, but the real human cost of the decisions officers make. I want that responsibility because I believe I can make a difference in the lives of the soldiers under my command. The general's expression remained neutral, giving no indication of whether her answer resonated with him.
That's a noble sentiment, Cadet Chen. But the military isn't short on people with good intentions. What makes you think you have what it takes to lead soldiers into combat?
Sarah thought about the leadership exercise, about the weight she had felt when real soldiers looked to her for guidance. Today, during the simulation, I realized that leadership isn't about having perfect answers. It's about making the best decisions possible with the information you have, and then, standing by those decisions. When I had to choose between the mission objective and saving a wounded soldier, I didn't hesitate.
We don't leave people behind. That's not a weakness, it's what makes us stronger as a unit.
Interesting perspective, General Martinez said, making notes on her file. Your evaluators mentioned that decision. Some might argue that mission completion should take priority over individual casualties.
How do you respond to that?
The question felt like a trap, but Sarah knew honesty was her only option. With respect, General, I understand that perspective, and there may be situations where mission completion requires accepting casualties. But, in that specific scenario, I had enough resources to accomplish both objectives. A leader who abandons soldiers when alternatives exist isn't someone I would want to serve under.
For the first time since the interview began, General Martinez showed a hint of expression, what might have been approval, though it was gone so quickly Sarah couldn't be certain. Tell me about your background, Cadet Chen. I see here that your father is Colonel Richard Chen. That must provide some insight into military life.
Sarah felt her stomach clench. This was the question she had been dreading, the one that would force her to acknowledge the very doubt that had driven her to push herself so hard.
Yes, sir.
My father has had a distinguished career, and growing up in military families has given me perspective on the sacrifices involved. However, my decision to pursue military service is my own. I'm sure it is, General Martinez said, but something in his tone suggested he had more to say on the subject.
I had an interesting conversation with your father yesterday evening.
Sarah felt the blood drain from her face.
Her father had called the general?
The implications ran through her mind like wildfire.
Had he tried to influence her evaluation? Had he shared his doubts about her capabilities?
I see that concerns you, General Martinez observed.
Perhaps I should share what he said.
Sarah braced herself for the worst.
Her father's words from the night before echoed in her mind, she can't do it. Had he called the general to express those same doubts? Had he sabotaged her chances out of some misguided attempt to protect her from failure?
Your father called to ask a favor, General Martinez continued, and Sarah felt her heart sink. He wanted to know if there was any way to ensure that his daughter received fair consideration, despite the challenges women face in military leadership roles.
The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father, who had seemed so dismissive of her dreams, had actually been concerned about her facing prejudice. The man who had mocked her aspirations had called a general to advocate for her fair treatment?
He also said something else that I found interesting, General Martinez continued. He told me that you had more determination and courage than any soldier he had served with, male or female. He said that his only concern wasn't whether you could succeed, but whether the military was ready to recognize and nurture that kind of potential. Sarah felt tears threatening to well up in her eyes, but she fought them back. The emotional revelation about her father's true feelings was overwhelming, but she couldn't afford to lose composure now. I didn't know he felt that way, sir. Fathers sometimes show their love in complicated ways, General Martinez said, his voice softening slightly. But that's not what we're here to discuss. What matters is your performance, your potential, and your readiness to serve as an officer in the United States Army. The general stood and walked to the window, looking out over the base where soldiers were conducting evening training exercises. Cadet Chan, in my 30 years of service, I've seen the military evolve in ways that seemed impossible when I was your age. I've watched women prove themselves in roles that were once considered impossible for them to fill. But I've also seen the challenges they face, the extra scrutiny, the need to be better than their male counterparts just to be considered equal. Sarah remained silent, sensing that the general was building toward something important. Your performance today was exceptional, he continued, turning back to face her. But, more than that, you demonstrated something that can't be taught, natural leadership instinct combined with moral courage. The way you handled the leadership exercise, particularly your decision regarding the wounded soldier, showed me that you understand what military service really means. Hope began to build in Sarah's chest, but she forced herself to remain composed. The general hadn't made his final decision clear yet. However, General Martinez continued, and Sarah's heart sank again, I need to be honest with you about what lies ahead. If you receive your commission, you'll face challenges that your male counterparts won't encounter. You'll be questioned, tested, and scrutinized in ways that may seem unfair. Some soldiers will assume you received your position because of quotas rather than merit. Others will be waiting for you to fail so they can say women don't belong in leadership roles. Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was describing. I'm prepared for those challenges, General. I've been facing them throughout my training. I believe you are, General Martinez said. But being prepared and actually living through it are different things. The question is, are you ready to be a pioneer? Because that's what you'll be, one of the first women to command in situations where lives depend on your decisions. You'll be representing not just yourself, but every woman who dreams of following in your footsteps. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders, but rather than feeling crushed by it, she felt energized. This was exactly what she had trained for, exactly what she wanted to achieve. Yes, sir. I'm ready for that responsibility. General Martinez returned to his desk and picked up her evaluation file. For long moments, he read through the reports from her various tests and exercises. Sarah sat in silence, her future hanging in the balance of whatever decision was forming in the general's mind. "Your written examination score was 96%, he said finally.
"Your physical fitness results exceeded standards by 20%.
"Your leadership exercise received the highest rating possible from all 3 evaluators." He looked up at her directly. "But what impressed me most was something Staff Sergeant Rodriguez mentioned in his debrief. He said that by the end of the exercise, he forgot you were a woman. Not because you acted like a man, but because you acted like a leader." Sarah felt her heart racing as the general opened his desk drawer and withdrew an official-looking document.
"Cadet Chen," General Martinez said, standing from his chair in a gesture that prompted Sarah to stand as well. "It is my honor to inform you that you have successfully completed your officer evaluation. Congratulations, Lieutenant Chun. You've earned your commission."
The words hit Sarah like a wave of relief, joy, and overwhelming emotion all at once.
She had done it.
Despite her father's initial doubts, despite the challenges and skepticism she had faced, despite the weight of representing all women in military leadership, she had proven herself worthy of command.
"Thank you, General," Sarah managed to say, her voice thick with emotion but her military bearing intact. "I won't let you down."
"I don't believe you will," General Martinez replied.
"But remember what I said about the challenges ahead. Your real test begins now."
As Sarah prepared to leave the general's office, her mind was already racing ahead to the responsibilities that awaited her. She thought about the soldiers she would lead, the decisions she would make, and the example she would set for future generations of women in military service. 6 months after receiving her commission, Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the entrance of the base chapel, adjusting her dress blue uniform one final time. Today was her military wedding to Captain Michael Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's younger brother whom she had met during a joint training exercise. The irony wasn't lost on her that the man who had first questioned her leadership during the evaluation was now becoming family. The ceremony had drawn military personnel from across the region, but the guest she was most nervous about seeing was her father. Colonel Richard Chen had flown in from his deployment in Germany, and this would be their first face-to-face meeting since her commissioning ceremony. Their phone conversations had been warmer since that day, but there remained an unspoken tension between them that needed resolution.
As guests began filing into the chapel, Sarah caught sight of General Martinez entering with his wife.
His presence meant a great deal to her. He had become something of a mentor in the months following her commissioning, offering guidance as she navigated her first command assignment. Under his guidance, Sarah had been assigned to lead a training unit for new recruits, a position that allowed her to develop her leadership skills while avoiding the most politically sensitive assignments until she had established herself. Her command had been successful beyond anyone's expectations. The recruits under her leadership had shown exceptional performance in both physical fitness and tactical exercises. More importantly, she had earned the respect of the seasoned non-commissioned officers who served alongside her. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, now serving in her unit, had become one of her strongest supporters, often telling other instructors about the day he realized that leadership had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with character. As the wedding ceremony began, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The scared young woman who had entered General Martinez's office 6 months ago felt like a different person entirely. Command had changed her in ways she was still discovering. She had learned to trust her instincts, to make difficult decisions without second-guessing herself, and to inspire confidence in others even when she felt uncertain. The ceremony proceeded with military precision, which seemed fitting for a gathering of so many service members. When it came time for the traditional military Arch of Sabers, Sarah felt a surge of pride as officers from multiple branches created the ceremonial pathway. This was her community now, her chosen family of people who understood the weight of service and sacrifice. As she and Michael walked beneath the raised sabers, Sarah caught sight of her father's face in the crowd. For the first time in years, she saw unconditional pride in his expression. The doubts and dismissive comments that had characterized their relationship seemed to have been replaced by genuine admiration for what she had accomplished. The reception was held in the Officers' Club, a venue that had seen countless military celebrations over the decades. As guests mingled and shared stories, Sarah found herself surrounded by people whose respect she had earned through action rather than expectation. Young female cadets approached her throughout the evening, seeking advice and inspiration. To them, she represented proof that their own dreams were achievable. "Lieutenant Chen," a voice called out, and Sarah turned to see General Martinez approaching with her father at his side. The sight of the two men together was both surprising and slightly intimidating. "General Martinez, thank you so much for coming," Sarah said, her military training keeping her composed despite her curiosity about what conversation had transpired between the two senior officers. "I wouldn't have missed it," General Martinez replied. "Your father and I have been having an interesting conversation about your recent performance reviews." Sarah felt a familiar flutter of nervousness. Performance reviews in the military could make or break careers, and she had been eagerly awaiting feedback on her first 6 months of command. "Your unit has achieved a 93% pass rate on advanced tactical training," her father said, and Sarah was surprised to hear genuine pride in his voice. "That's the highest rate in the division. Your training methods have been so effective that other units are requesting to observe your sessions," General Martinez added. "We're considering implementing some of your innovations across multiple training facilities." The praise felt surreal to Sarah. These were the same men who had once questioned whether she belonged in military leadership, and now they were discussing her methods as models for other commanders to follow. "There's something else," General Martinez continued, and his tone became more serious. "We have an opportunity that I'd like you to consider. The Pentagon is looking for a junior officer to participate in a special assignment developing new training protocols for integrated combat units. It would mean a deployment to the Middle East, working directly with Allied forces to test new approaches to joint operations." Sarah felt her heart race. This was the kind of assignment that could define a military career, the opportunity to influence policy and strategy at the highest levels. It was also exactly the kind of high-profile, high-risk assignment that could either establish her as a rising star or end her career if things went poorly. "It's a significant opportunity," her father said quietly, "and a significant risk. You'd be representing not just yourself, but the entire concept of women in combat leadership roles. If you succeed, it opens doors for others. If you fail..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Sarah understood the implications perfectly. This assignment would put her in a position where her performance would be scrutinized by military leaders around the world. Success would validate everything she had worked for, but failure would be used as evidence that women weren't ready for the highest levels of military responsibility. "When would you need an answer?" Sarah asked, her mind already working through the implications for her new marriage, her current command, and her long-term career goals. "Take your time to discuss it with your husband," General Martinez said. "But I'll need to know within 2 weeks. The assignment begins in 3 months." As the general moved away to speak with other guests, Sarah found herself alone with her father for the first time since her commissioning ceremony. The awkwardness she had expected was replaced by something that felt almost like mutual respect. "I owe you an apology," Colonel Chen said quietly, his voice barely audible above the reception noise. "When you first told me about your military ambitions, I thought I was protecting you from disappointment. I had seen too many qualified people fail because the system wasn't ready for them." Sarah nodded, understanding now that his earlier dismissive comments had come from experience rather than prejudice. "You were trying to spare me from what you thought would be inevitable failure. But I was wrong," he continued. "Not about the challenges you'd face, but about your ability to overcome them. Watching you succeed, seeing the respect you've earned from your soldiers and superiors, it's made me realize that change in the military doesn't happen because institutions decide to evolve. It happens because exceptional people force evolution by proving that old limitations are artificial." The conversation was interrupted by the traditional military reception activities. Sarah participated in the cake-cutting ceremony with the regulation military saber, posed for photographs with various military dignitaries, and accepted congratulations from dozens of fellow officers. But, throughout the evening, her mind kept returning to the opportunity General Martinez had presented. Later, as the reception began winding down, Sarah noticed a commotion near the entrance to the officers' club. A group of senior officers had gathered around someone who had just arrived, and she could hear excited murmurs of conversation. Curious, she made her way through the crowd to see what was causing the stir. To her amazement, she found herself face to face with General Patricia Adams, the highest-ranking female officer in the Army and a personal hero of Sarah's since childhood. General Adams had broken barriers that seemed impossible to breach, rising to command positions that no woman had ever held before. "Lieutenant Chen," General Adams said, extending her hand with a warm smile, "I've been hearing remarkable things about your work. I hope you don't mind my dropping by your reception unannounced, but I was in the area and wanted to meet the young officer who's causing such a stir in training command." Sarah felt starstruck, struggling to maintain her military composure while meeting someone she had admired for so many years. "General Adams, it's an incredible honor to meet you. Your career has been an inspiration to every woman in military service. I understand General Martinez has presented you with an interesting opportunity," General Adams said, her tone becoming more serious. "It's exactly the kind of assignment I would have killed for when I was your age, a chance to influence policy and demonstrate capability at the highest levels." The conversation that followed would change the trajectory of Sarah's career in ways she couldn't have imagined. General Adams shared insights from her own experience breaking barriers in military leadership, offering perspective on both the opportunities and pitfalls that lay ahead. As the evening reached its conclusion, Sarah found herself standing with her new husband, her father, General Martinez, and General Adams, a group that represented both her past and her future in military service. The conversation had turned to the broader implications of women in combat leadership, and the role that pioneers like Sarah would play in shaping the military's evolution. "The young officers coming up behind you are watching every move you make," General Adams told Sarah. "They need to see that success is possible, that the barriers they've been told exist can actually be overcome with competence and determination." It was then that General Martinez did something that would be remembered and talked about for years afterward. In front of the entire gathering of officers, he turned to face Sarah and, with deliberate ceremony, rendered a full military salute to the young lieutenant. The gesture was unprecedented. Generals didn't salute lieutenants, military protocol dictated the exact opposite. But General Martinez held his salute with dignity and purpose, and, one by one, every officer in the room followed suit. Colonel Chen saluted his daughter. General Adams saluted her fellow pioneer. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, still in the room from the wedding ceremony, saluted his commanding officer. The moment stretched in perfect silence, and Sarah understood that she was witnessing something historic. This wasn't just acknowledgement of her individual achievements, it was recognition of what her success represented for the future of military service. As Sarah returned the collective salute, she thought about the young woman who had entered General Martinez's office 6 months ago, carrying the weight of her father's doubted words, "She can't do it." Standing in a room full of senior military officers who had just voluntarily saluted her achievement, those words seemed to belong to a different lifetime entirely. The path ahead would indeed be challenging, filled with assignments that would test her abilities and decisions that would influence the careers of countless women who would follow in her footsteps. But, in that moment, surrounded by the respect of her peers and the pride of her family, Lieutenant Sarah Chen understood that she had already accomplished something more significant than earning a commission. She had proven that determination, competence, and courage could overcome any barrier, and, in doing so, she had opened doors that would never be closed again.